I want to open today's podcast by talking quickly about an issue that happened over last weekend's Tuscan Grand Prix. On the Sunday, after winning the race, Lewis Hamilton stood on the podium with a Breonna Taylor shirt that's created a lot of controversy since Sunday, including an official inspection. And I just wanted to lay out my thoughts on the issue, and after that, I'll go no further into it. Now, I do not know enough about the situation to digress whether or not Breonna Taylor was innocent or not, so in that respect, I'm not going to comment. However, what I will say is that from recent events over the last 12 months, it appears that there are still racial issues in both the US and the UK. Many have said that a political statement shouldn't be made at a sporting event. And to that I agree. Telling somebody who to vote for or how to think just because you have a platform is wrong. However, I do not consider the killing of Breonna Taylor to be a political issue. A life has been taken and the necessary action to uncover the reasoning for the incident has not been done, nor has the justice that needs to be served. Therefore, Lewis raising an issue that is clearly predominant and he values and feels that awareness is needed to be given to, and for that, I give him credit. And for the people saying that the political statement should have nothing to do with sport, and something like Breonna Taylor has nothing to do with sport, I completely agree. It has nothing to do with Formula 1. However, sponsors don't either. 99% of sponsors have nothing to do with racing. Heineken, Marlboro, from tobacco all the way back in the day, none of them had anything to do with racing. So if you can accept one, you can accept the other. Thank you for letting me talk about that, and on to today's podcast. What is up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Shine a Light podcast. Today we return to talk about the Tuscan Grand Prix. What a crazy race. 2 freaking red flags. If that isn't enough entertainment in at least those 2 incidents, I don't know what is. There's a lot to talk about. Bottas, will he ever be able to beat Lewis Hamilton? Albon finally gets a podium. Will George Russell ever score a point? As well as an unpopular opinion from me, the best and worst of Twitter, and my predictions for the upcoming Sochi Grand Prix. Now, a quick note, if you enjoy, growing subs on a podcast channel is very, very difficult. So if you can support in any way by clicking that red button, please go and do so. The help is hugely appreciated. But on with today's podcast, and let's open by talking about the Tuscan Grand Prix and picking up a few main things. We're going to kick it off, of course, with my driver of the day. Now, I could have gone for Lewis, you could have gone for George, maybe a Charles Leclerc, but I'm going to go for Alex Albon. He did a number of good overtakes, especially that one on Daniel Ricciardo, drove a solid drive when people were going out of the race left, right and centre, and picked up his first podium in F1 history. So for that reason, after Gasly last week, I think Albon fully deserves the driver of the day in this week. Although, I do feel at least a little bit bad for Daniel Ricciardo because I really want to see him get at least one podium in that Renault car. And now on to a new thing. Unluckiest man of the day. I don't think this one's going to be too difficult to work out. Yes, you arguably had Sainz as an issue, but I think George Russell getting screwed over by Grosjean and Raikkonen being able to use fresher tyres or warm tyres when it came to the restart really screwed him out of his first ever F1 points. And for that reason, he is going to be our first ever unlucky driver of the day. And my race score for this week, how exciting was it? I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10 because the red flags and the incidents and a couple of the overtakes were very, very good. However, in reality, a lot of them, pretty much all the action came down to turn 1 and the start-finish straight, whereas other tracks have excitement all across the board. So for that reason, a solid score, but we've had better races through history. Now, for the major talking points, we'll kick it off for in this Grand Prix. First of all, we'll talk about who is to blame in that pile-up incident. Obviously, Valtteri Bottas was originally blamed and was originally investigated. Turned out not to be his fault because the safety car light had not come off and he was not allowed to start racing again. Now, to be honest, I think this is a racing incident to an extent in that just a mistake has been made, and as dangerous as it was, we'd all hope that something like this does not happen again. However, there is talk that George Russell was to blame. I think if you look at images, you'll see he is slightly further back and the man in the front of the gap between the two, chasing down the other group who slows down just before because he realises he's not going to be able to go full speed. That then causes the issues that Giovinazzi, Latifi and Sainz all get caught up with, and was it Magnussen was the other one that had a spin as well. And just in general, fingers crossed we don't have an issue. But as I said, yes, Russell is currently the prime suspect, you could call it. But I think at the end of the day, you boil it down, it's one of these things that just sometimes goes completely tits up. It happens, and I think everybody just has to move on with the situation and just assess how they can make it much safer, and so that an issue like that never happens again. But my second major talking point is, should Mugello return to Formula 1? For me, a lot of people have been saying yes, and the drivers, a number of them, had said yes. I'm going to say no. I think, first of all, I like having just one race per country. I think that avoids giving bias to maybe certain teams that may get more support there in Ferrari, and also certain drivers, maybe Giovinazzi will get a lot of support there, Charles Leclerc obviously does. I would personally prefer it if each country only had one Grand Prix, which is as we currently have it, which does of course mean we'd have no Imola and no Mugello, as I can't see Monza getting cut from the calendar. However, I'm not too traumatised, because let's be honest, as exciting as that race was, outside the incidents, it could have been a real stinker. The Mercs absolutely dominated. Yes, Albon got a podium, which was good to see. We had a couple of good crashes, but other than that, every single overtake was around turn 1. And yes, that was a great overtaking spot. And the start was very exciting as well, regardless of whether there was going to be a crash or not. I thought it was heating up really well. And I feel that turn 1 is a very exciting one. But I don't think one corner is enough to make a race worthy of being on the season. Now, I will say I think it is better than other tracks that are currently on the circuit, on the calendar, for example, Sochi. However, I don't think being better than other not exciting enough tracks is enough to warrant you being on the calendar for next year or into the future. And as I said a second ago, I like just having one race per country. I think it fits well. And as Monza is the classic race of Italy, I can't see that changing. So for me, it's not going on the grid, or the calendar, sorry. But my third thought, and this one was one that I only added late to my plan for the podcast, is Alex Albon ready for Red Bull? Has he finally earned his stripes? Now, I thought about this one. At first, I thought, no. His results were mediocre, and on the one hand, you could argue, compared to other quality drivers, you look at Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, Sebastian Vettel, all these men in worse cars than Albon, who are, I think most people will agree, better drivers than him. But I think Albon is actually the right man. And I've been thinking about this for a while, and the conclusion I've come to is the reason why Albon is a better choice than Gasly. And it's a bit of a weird one, but I'm 100% sticking by it. When you look at Alex Albon, you see a direct number 2. And when you look at Max Verstappen, you see a direct number 1 that just doesn't want somebody that is going to clash with him. He wants the team to be fully behind him, and that's exactly what Red Bull are doing, and that is working well in the Max perspective. Whereas I think Albon is happy to fit that role. I think maybe Albon, I think most people don't see him as a top championship competitor. A solid driver, don't get me wrong, but not a top championship competitor. And for that reason, I think he's a better choice than Gasly. Because Gasly could become a world champion. I don't think he's the favourite, I think there's men ahead of him. But you've got to think, he's an F2 winner. He was competitive when he first drove in that Toro Rosso. He's been very, very strong since he's returned to AlphaTauri. He won at Monza. He's put in a string of very impressive performances this year. And I see no reason why he shouldn't be the main man at a team. I know which team I want him at. I want Gasly at Renault. I think Gasly at Renault, here's the player I want. I want Esteban Ocon booting out that seat. I don't rate him that highly. Maybe stick him in a Williams. They've got the investment from Deloriton. So what I want to see, this is going to get confusing. I want to see George Russell head up to Mercedes. I then want to see Valtteri Bottas. I'm going to have to figure out where I put him. I haven't worked that out yet. Esteban Ocon moves to Williams, and then Pierre Gasly heads up to Renault as the number 1 driver, understudy to Alonso whilst he's there for the 2 years, 2022, whilst they develop the car. Then in 2023, Pierre Gasly will be experienced and ready to become a world champion if the Renault car is competitive enough, and I think that'd be an awesome career for him to have. Whereas Albon, he can help. He is like a Barrichello, an Irvine. He's not quite on their level maybe, but he's a number 2 driver out and out. He's not going to pose a threat, but he's not going to cause trouble, and he will bring consistent results. And I think maybe that's just what they need. They don't want trouble. They don't need a mess at Red Bull. They want to improve the car, not have a fight between drivers. And losing Max would be an awful situation for them. So for that reason, I think Alex Albon is the man. Pierre Gasly, I want to see him at Renault instead of Esteban Ocon. I want to see him at Renault. I don't rate Ocon. and Alonso, his contract expires at the end of 2021. I say we boot him out of the Renault seat. If he has to go to Merc, he goes to Merc. But I want to see Gasly in a Renault at some point. I think that'd be awesome. Now, this week's big question. We talked about the talking points of Mugello. I don't want it back on the calendar. Alex Albon is finally ready for Red Bull. What of our big question this week? My big question this week, and I want to make this a little thing where each week we have one big question that we answer, whether it's Formula 1 or football. And so leave them in the comments down below. Is Valtteri Bottas the man for Mercedes? I think it's a pretty comfortable question. It's being asked more and more week in, week out. And I'm going to digress my thoughts now. So my first question, I've got 3 questions. Should they drop him? Can he ever beat Hamilton? And who could replace him? Now the first one is interesting. Should they drop Valtteri Bottas? On the one hand, no. The team is working well. They're winning pretty much every race. They're dominating. They have a solid driver, 1-2 driver lineup. Nothing is going wrong at the team that suggests that Valtteri needs to leave. However, the reason that Valtteri should leave is that Lewis isn't going to be there forever. Lewis is a solid driver, and I reckon he could last till 2025. However, by the time Lewis hits 40, I think I personally would have to say maybe his time is up and it's time for him to move on, and I just don't think he'll be the driver he once was. And Merc need to be prepared for that. They need to be bringing in a new driver to mould to replace Lewis. I've got a number of men that obviously are high candidates in my eyes for that role, but I don't believe that Lewis can be the sole man relied on forever, because that just won't work. Lewis won't be there forever. They need to start preparing a replacement, and as he's not coming in 2020, he's not coming in 2021, 2022, with new regulations, maybe keep Valtteri for that year, but then George Russell's contract expires at the end of 2021 with Williams, so maybe not the play. I anticipate we'll see Bottas leave at the end of 2022. I'm not sure where Bottas will go. I wouldn't be surprised to see him move to Red Bull. I wouldn't be surprised to see him move to Red Bull. Ferrari have a lot of options. They've got Leclerc as their main man for the next few years. Sainz is going to play a solid number 2. And then they have Schumacher, Schwartzman, Eilert and others coming through their academies. They have no lack of drivers. Red Bull, on the other hand, could do with somebody. He could still play a number 2 behind Max Verstappen. I think he'd be happy to do that when he's winding down his career. I'd actually quite like to see Bottas and Russell do a swap, where Bottas goes back to Williams to try and build them back up to the team they were when he was first at the team. Well, not in his first year, he got 5 points in his first year. No, he got 4 points, a combined 5 points with Maldonado in the 2014 and 2015 seasons at the beginning of the V8 era. I think it'd be awesome to see Bottas go back, be really crucial in their development, and leave a really good legacy with that team as one of their best ever drivers in the recent era. Do I think that'll happen? Probably not. But I think it'll be a cool story. In the terms of a story arc, it works. In terms of being realistic, it doesn't. But a Russell-Bottas swap is something I would like to see. So I would say that by 2023 at the latest, Bottas needs to be dropped. However, for now, I feel they have no issue in keeping him, and there's no reason why he can't continue to be a good and consistent number 2 for Lewis for the next couple of years, because it seems to be what they want. To have a solid, consistent and basic lineup seems to be the game they want to play. So for that reason, go for it, mate. If it's what works, go for it. But the next question is, can he ever beat Lewis? And for me, this is an easy one. I just can't see it happening. I think if it was going to happen, it would have been this year. This is his 4th year at the team now, and you have to say that if it was going to happen, yes, his first couple of years he didn't really get a big chance. 2019 he put in a decent performance, but unlike Rosberg, he's never really pushed Lewis on a week-to-week basis. Even in the Grand Prix, now I know maybe there's a bit more team management since the Rosberg-Hamilton clashes as such, but I think it must be said that Bottas isn't on the same level as Rosberg. He's an excellent driver, don't get me wrong, excellent driver, but he's not on the same level as Rosberg, and for that reason, I think I just can't see him doing it every week, unless it's an off week for Lewis. Valtteri is 10 seconds down the line, 5-10 seconds down the line. He's never looked like pressuring. Every week we're hearing Lewis saying, oh, it is tight with Valtteri. It never is tight. Lewis is comfortable every time. Maybe that's to do with team orders, I cannot say, and I'm not in the Mercedes garage, so I can't judge that. But I think at the end of the day, it just has to be said that Valtteri isn't competitive enough in the current climate to be competing with Lewis on a championship basis, and I don't see him winning it this year, and I don't see him winning it in 2021 unless something goes vastly wrong for Lewis. However, the final question that we brought up in the beginning is who replaces him? Who would replace Valtteri? And I've got 5 men. I've considered doing this for a video, I might still. And if I do it for a video, go check out the latest channel. We want to hit 100 subs pretty damn soon. We're 26 away, so go and subscribe to the channel. But there are 5 men, I think. There's 5 options. We'll start with the lead side. We've got Max Verstappen, who will come in when Lewis leaves. Here's the thing. He could technically come in as a Valtteri replacement. The only reason Max will come in as a Valtteri replacement is because it's the only time that Max can be bought out of a contract, just as Valtteri is leaving. Ideally, I think Toto Wolff and Mercedes would prefer Hamilton to step down and Verstappen to step into the seat. I think that is the most comfortable transition. We've seen Lewis with other drivers before, the likes of Alonso. Doesn't always end as pretty as maybe they would hope. Then in at number 4, you've probably got Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll obviously has a good relationship with Mercedes. They get lent the engines for the racing points. And Lance Stroll will be, I think, prepared to buy anybody to get Lance into the best seat possible. And to be fair, Lance is doing a damn good job this year and could genuinely be a quality driver in contention. You've got to consider it. So, of the options, and there are 3 in the middle. Oh, excluding George Russell, we'll get to. You've got 3 drivers in the middle. Lance Stroll, is comfortably beating Sergio Perez. He's beating him fairly well, to be honest. He's beating out Sergio. Maybe there are some issues that Lance is getting a better car. We don't know that, and it's quite possible that's happening. However, regardless, beating Sergio comfortably, fighting for that best of the rest spot outside the top 3, I think he has to be in contention for the seat, just because the fact that he's doing so goddamn well. Racing Point have a good relationship. Lawrence Stroll would love to see him head there. So I don't see it as impossible that Lance could be the future man for Mercedes if their plans change. At number 3, I've got Esteban Ocon. Now, Ocon's career has dipped. In 2020, it was rumoured that he might replace Bottas. That did not happen. And he's had to rebuild. He's signed to Renault. He could still go back to Merc. He has a 2-year contract with Renault. When that expires at the end of the 2021 season, for 2022, which was when Valtteri expires, he could take the swap. However, the fact that he has been battered by Ricciardo this year, and honestly has not been as competitive as... He hasn't been in that clear top 10. He's been behind the likes of Gasly in my eyes, in terms of performance. I think he's on the level of Vettel. I just don't, and that's not 4-time world champion Vettel, that's current Vettel, which is a hot mess. I just don't think he is a world champion in the way that a lot of people see him, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. His loss of a seat in 2019, I reckon, damaged his development. Maybe throwing him straight into the deep end, maybe he should have gone through GP2, wouldn't have hurt to do that. So I think there's a number of reasons, but I think for all those issues, I just don't think Esteban is the right driver. And also he makes a lot of mistakes. He makes a lot of mistakes compared to other drivers. I just don't think he's the right man for Mercedes. And personally, I'm not a big fan. Personally, I'm not a fan. I actually prefer Stroll over Ocon, which is controversial, but there you go. Then number 2 spot, we've got 2 Brits. We've got Lando Norris. This is an interesting one because Lando's current manager works for Mercedes. So there is certainly a link there. And also, you have to consider, Merc wouldn't mind having a like-for-like Lewis replacement. Lando is as such, I don't know how to put it, he's focused on the public eye as well as just on the racing. Some drivers like Valtteri are just focused on winning the races and being an F1 driver. Someone like Lewis is involved in so many other things, whether it be his fashion, whether it be philanthropy, all that. Lando Norris is Twitch streaming, which isn't quite the same, but I think Lando Norris is very popular on a social level, and I think that bodes really well for him being a replacement man. McLaren are taking the Mercedes engines back in 2021. Another reason to consider that it is possible that he could head in and take a switch as part of the deal in the future. And I mean, McLaren have options if he were to leave. I think there's men around the grid. Maybe Valtteri could head to McLaren, although I don't see that happening for the reason being, I mean, Esteban could head to McLaren. No, I don't think you put Ricciardo and Ocon back together after having them at separate team. Perez, I don't know. There's options for them. There's options for the McLaren team if Norris were to leave. And I'd love to see Norris win a world championship. I think it'd be amazing. He's such a great lad. Really, really cool. Really, really nice. Lives really near me, actually, which is quite cool. He's in Guildford. I'm in that Surrey posh area. And I'd love to see another Brit continue to take the title, so the Brits can really assure that we are the best drivers in the 21st century. And in the number 1 spot, I think you can all guess it, is going to be George Russell. George is obviously the man being groomed for that seat. He spent, it'll be his third year in 2021 at the Williams team. And yeah, he hasn't scored a point. Yeah, he struggled at times. But I think he's still the favourite for that drive, regardless of how many issues and how many stupid rules, like letting drivers have warm tyres for the restarts go on. I think for the moment, he is still the favourite to replace Valtteri. But it's interesting to see that Mercedes are lining up Russell and Ocon both as opportunities for that Mercedes seat, based on the fact that both their contracts expire currently at the same time as Valtteri's, just ahead of the regulation period. So it's clear that Russell is obviously in their eyesight, and Ocon, although not the current favourite, is still being considered 100%, I believe, personally. Now, I want to do something else. This is going to be a new section to the podcast called Unpopular Opinion. Now, when we have guests, I'm going to ask them an unpopular opinion, a bit like, actually it's not like that, that's a different series I have an idea for, but I'm going to be giving one of my unpopular opinions in Formula 1. You probably won't agree, but I'm going to give my argument for it nonetheless. And if you have unpopular opinions that you'd like me to react to in the future in the comments down below, stick them there. And yeah, maybe I can make a video out of that, or maybe we can add them as a section to the podcast. I'm always trying to improve this, and I want to get it as keeping smoothly flowing and have as many cool new ideas and sections to add to this as possible, so we can make the best viewing for you as possible. Now, I'm going to have to reset my camera because this thing only lasts 20 minutes. Are back, and as I said just a second ago, we're doing my F1 unpopular opinion. Now, I've got a controversial one. That's the point of unpopular opinions, but I've got a controversial one. I think backmarkers can be good for Formula 1, and I have a number of reasons for why I actually believe this is true. Now, a little bit of context. Ever since the early 2010s, we had Caterham, Marussia, and HRT all absolutely flop, and let me just say they were goddamn awful. But I think there are some positives to backmarker cars. Maybe not that backmarker, but teams further back in the grid that truly maybe will never be competitive. Now, in the current age of Formula 1, B teams are becoming more regular. We've got AlphaTauri, we've obviously got Williams fostering a Mercedes driver, and we've got Alfa Romeo as well, and maybe we'll see Haas doing a similar thing in the future. And whilst it is a shame to look at teams and say, you're arguably never going to win a championship in this car, I think that's understandable. That's the same as anything. You have lower leagues in football, and yes, I understand you have the lower leagues, Formula 2, Formula 3, which you can compare to, but even then, I think getting experience as a young driver is something that is getting harder and harder, because at the moment, you look at some of the young drivers coming through, only a few of them are going to get seats, especially considering drivers are getting older once again. Drivers are starting to compete at an older age than they were a few years back when drivers were retiring, at least a few years earlier, as sports science continues to progress, and I believe it will continue further. So I think backmarkers will be positive. First of all, backmarkers offer another set of racing. Now yes, you may say, oh, they're not competing for the championships, that's boring. You watch the relegation fight in the Premier League, that's one of the best goddamn bits, and that's the shitholes fighting. The shitty fights can be more exciting than the head-to-heads at the front, because the head-to-heads at the front is like, perfect move, and, or not perfect move, you know what I mean, they're always going to be on the front foot of everything. At the back, it's carnage, and it's awesome to watch at times, I can't lie. Drivers scrapping for their careers, or to get that big move forward. So I think a backmarker, or a couple of backmarker teams, wouldn't be a bad thing to have in the sport. It adds another layer, another dynamic. We've sort of seen it this year, to be honest. We've had the Haas, Alfas and Williams kind of competing at the back, and it'll be interesting to see which of the six come out as the best of the backmarkers, because I think that sets a precedent down. You get best of the backmarkers, you're driving the shitter, but you're beating everybody else in your category as such. So I think it brings forward something of value. Now, on my comment a second ago, on the fact that we're starting to get B teams, I don't think that's a bad thing. Now, you may look at it and say, oh, that means less competitive teams, but at the end of the day, there's always going to be like 3 to 4 teams at best competing for a championship. So having teams that are maybe specifically focused on being a youth team wouldn't be a bad thing, because there's plenty of teams out there and plenty of people that want to create F1 teams that maybe don't have the finance to come in and become a McLaren or Ferrari or a Mercedes. However, they have the passion for the sport, the energy to put in, and maybe on a localised level would be really good for younger drivers. You think back when the manor and whatnot were there, You had Daniel Ricciardo, Jules Bianchi, Esteban Ocon, Pascal Wehrlein. All of them began their drives in those backmarker small teams. And I think they offer a different opportunity. What they could do is, as there are becoming drivers returning older, you look at Alonso, Vettel still hanging about, Hamilton is looking like becoming a 7, 8, 9-time world champion. Drivers are getting older, and that's leaving less spots, especially with only 20 on the grid, so encouraging smaller teams wouldn't be a bad thing. Then what I think they'd have to do, or the way to make it fairer, because I think we all agree that with the financial backing that these teams may lack, it would be difficult for them to compete. However, what they could do is they could kind of have like a driver-funded program, maybe like a draft setup, where if a team comes into the sport as a B team, they get a fund and maybe a draft for a driver. So, for example, what you could have is each of the top teams have a driver that they can select of their young drivers. So, let's say, for example, there are 3 backmarker teams, and there could be a level as to when you become a backmarker team. So, if you're new to the sport, or if you scored less than the equivalent of one race win in the prior season in the Constructors, you become a backmarker team for the following year. That first of all would make drivers fight for their careers that much more, because if you think, and what then happens, and this is going to get quite complicated to explain. So, if you get less than 25 points in the current racing situations in your Constructors team, you have to take a rookie or young driver on for the following season. And if you're a new team as well, the same rules apply. Now, this would mean that some teams would often be taking on a new driver, and those new drivers can come from the academies of those top teams. So, each of the teams, let's say there are 3 teams that get less than the equivalent of 1 win, which probably will happen this year with Haas, Alfa Romeo and Williams. They become backmarker teams for the upcoming season. That A does not mean that they have to be there permanently, encouraging investors to come in and say, this backmarker team is really, really good. We can make them if I invest money into a challenging team. So it encourages people to invest in these backmarkers that people currently say are hopeless. And they also get a quality driver. The rules are simple. The teams, each of those teams, let's say there are 3 teams at the back. The top 3 teams of the championship the prior year, let's say this year it may well be Mercedes, Red Bull and McLaren. Let's say it's those 3. Mercedes, Red Bull and McLaren all offer up a rookie driver or a young driver, or one of their youngsters, because they have a lot of them, let's be brutally honest, and they then get stuck into a draft. The 3 teams that finish at the bottom get to select one of them each, with the highest performing team selecting first and the lowest performing team selecting last. This would add like a punishment and reward system, as well as encouraging, forcing drivers that are currently in seats, such as Magnussen and Grosjean, to say, we have to speed up. If we don't get 25 points for the end of the season, one of us is out of a contract regardless, because the team has to bring in this new young driver. It'll make silly season more exciting, and I think a draft would be cool in Formula 1. It'd be a little new addition, and teams can apply to be a B team as well. If you're to permanently become a B team, this is the alternative. Teams come in and apply for a B team fund and a driver from one of the A teams as such. You get that. It adds more drives to the sport, more action, more excitement, and I think it wouldn't be too bad to see. I think it'd be exciting. As I say, it adds another dynamic, and it also stop teams such as Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull stockpiling their academies, like we see in football with Chelsea, stockpiling their academies and then turning around and saying, we have no seats available. Because then they can turn around to say to Campos Racing, who are a small team, or Prima, who've decided to step into Formula 1, and say, we've got this young driver for you, you have to take on an under-23 as part of your ruling because you applied for extra funding as a B team. Take our lad, he's super promising, we can now get him a seat rather than him getting swapped under the rug, like we've seen Esteban Ocon and many others in the past and will continue to see. This is an awesome opportunity for all parties involved. Win-win-win, more action on track. Yes, slight pain in the arse with other drivers. More racing, more youngsters coming in, more opportunities, more teams, more people able to enjoy the sport. I think it's a win-win situation. What do you think? What do you think? Should backmarker teams be allowed? Should we have backmarker teams where a few teams come in, sign themselves up as B teams, get an extra finance, but have to take an under-23 driver for one of the A teams? Do you agree with that or not? That was a weird explanation. I dig that now, but we're going to roll with that. That's the first cut. That's the final cut. That's podcast live for you. But finally, we've got my predictions and the best and worst of Twitter. Twitter is always a place with bullshit. And here we go. First up, in my opinion, Russell is predominantly to blame for yesterday's crash at the Tuscan Grand Prix. It was not yesterday. It was all the way 5 days ago when you're seeing this upload. He was too far from the back, and there is an image here that I probably will stick on screen on the highlights package. So if you want to check out the highlights package as well as the main podcast, do that. Also, thank you so much for the support on the last podcast. We are drifting, but still. I think, yeah, there is an argument for that. Russell has clearly allowed the gap to grow too fast, trying to save his tyres to get a good run off, and maybe there is an extent to which he is to blame for the issues at hand here. I still stand by it. I think it's just one of these things that happens, but you have to look into it and say maybe Russell has to take a portion of the blame. And maybe that's karma. It was that red flag that then screwed him over that meant that he wouldn't score any points at the Grand Prix. So, all's fair in war or whatever the phrase. And it wasn't that one, it was the Stroll one that screwed over Russell. So that's not true. Now, our second comment, or our second tweet. Want to keep budget cap low and raise competitiveness. Progressive random starting grid. The teams will see more exciting races as teams are back and forth across the grid. This one I disagree with. I like qualifying. I think qualifying is something different, something new, and it adds variety. Now, yes, people have suggested the sprint race, but to be honest, what will happen is the Mercs will move to about high up the grid, like 5th, 6th place. The Williams will start in first, and then the mid-tier teams will just start the back every Grand Prix because they won't be able to get past the front runners, and they'll just get, it just won't work. I don't think random grid work. I think the current setup of having qualifying is the best thing, and I stand by that. Whilst I'll be interested to see a reverse grid race maybe once, if it works maybe, but I don't think random grids, it takes away competitiveness in my eyes, because it's leaving something up to chance, where teams will now set up their cars solely for race day. I just don't see it. I see it as unfair. It's giving an unjust advantage. How do you make it fair? Yes, you could do like a random number generator or something, but I think the fairest way, fastest car around the track wins. It's been done for years, and whilst conservativeness is bad for everything, I think in this scenario, it's probably for the best, and I disagree with this. This is going the worst of Twitter. And then finally, we keep seeing these Gasly Albon tweets. Albon could have had 2 further podiums if he hadn't been taken out. Gasly was decent in qualifying, but went backwards during the race. Albon may be dead in 1 lap, but at least he moves forward during the Grand Prix. Gasly does have good 1 lap pace, and Albon at times is sus in qualifying. I'll agree with that. However, they've said Gasly Albon and they disagree with that. I disagree with that. I think Gasly is better than Albon. And I said this earlier, I think Gasly is better than Albon. I think Albon is a better fit at Red Bull than Gasly. So, team scenarios, I think, is what is going on there. I think Albon, as a second driver, works well for the team. He's bringing in consistent points. He's not going to compete with Max. I said this earlier. But I do... This is a solid tweet. It's got some solid points to it, but I think I disagree with him in saying that Albon is better than Gasly. Gasly could have had other podium opportunities, I reckon. I reckon if he'd been given a bit longer, maybe his confidence would have come up. And he's done really goddamn well since he's got back in the AlphaTauri. So for that reason, Gasly is still the better driver than Albon, in my humble opinion. And that's the 3 tweets that we have for today. Meaning we are headed to our final section. It's prediction times for the Sochi Grand Prix. We have the race winner, we have pole position, we have best of the rest, we have best of back runners, and we have shock of the week. Now we're going to kick off with pole position. I'm going to be boring. I'm saying Lewis Hamilton. I don't think anything exciting is going to happen. I'm going to say Lewis Hamilton for the race winner as well. I just don't see anybody coming in and just shocking it. Valtteri's been poor and is under pressure right now. Not for a contract, because of the fact that everyone's calling him shit. Max has had multiple retirements. Is probably a little bit anxious right now. So I think Lewis will take another pole, another win, maybe another fastest lap as well, all in one. Best of the rest. This is my favourite section. There's so much going on in the midfield this week. Now, Sochi. Who is it going to suit? Nobody. Nobody likes the race. But my money's on Lance Stroll. He's had some really good races this year. The McLarens had a poor Grand Prix outing last weekend. Sainz has a slight injury to his wrist. Ricciardo could be a shout, you know. Ricciardo's been doing very well, but I think the racing points are still looking very, very quick. The Mercs have great straight line speed when you boil it down to it. The long first straight or the full back straight you have in Sochi, and the other one in early sector 2 or early sector 3, late sector 2. I think it all plays into a racing point in the Mercs' hands. So I'm going to say Lance Stroll will get the best of the rest performance. Best of the back markers. Kimi's been doing some good performances, so my money is going to be on Kimi for the moment. I just think Despite the fact he's, 39 now, almost 40, he's still a spectacular driver. The Hasses are always up and down. The Williams have had a poor few races since the start of the season when they've improved. So I'm going to give it to Kimi for now, and Gio hasn't had the best of racing performances, to be honest, and Grosjean is last in the championship. And shock of the week. My shock of the week is going to be, this is going to have to be a weird call. What's going to be a shock? Albon pulls in back-to-back podiums? Possible. Certainly possible. Sebastian Vettel. That would be a big call. Sebastian Vettel sits on the podium. Cannot see it happening. Don't think it will. I think my call is going to be, we're going to get another shock podium finisher. We're going to see... That would have to contradict my other one, actually. Okay, we're going to make a bold call. We're going to make a bold statement. Throw out the rulebook. Lewis will still win the Grand Prix. My best the rest is going to be Sergio Perez, because my shock of the week is going to be that Sergio Perez finishes on the podium this weekend, and he will then thus take the best the rest, with Lance finishing 4th, and Toto Wolff will take his second ever 1, 2, 3, 4 in engines constructors, which would be amazing in his respect. The last was in Bahrain 2015, I believe, with the Mercs and the Williams. So that's my call. Perez will finish on the podium, despite being out of contract, despite all the issues. He's going to beat Stroll, prove everybody that he can get that final podium, that may be the last in his career. It's going to happen. That is my call. And that is all for today's podcast. 35 minutes long, probably 38 or 40 actually when it boils down. I'm cutting these up into clips now, so go check out the highlights. Go suggest this podcast to your friends as well, and go subscribe if you haven't already. Other than that, check out my main channel layers, check out my Instagram and Twitter. Links will be in the description. If you want to join and get involved, DM me or anything, I don't mind. And then if you want to stick questions down below, shoot them in the comments as well. It'll be football next week. Until then, peace!